On paper, a number of things might seem the Nurgle versus Kislev matchup to be somewhat unfavorable for Nurgle. They tend to have a lack of anti-large armor piercing and AP in general and anti-large in general. Of course, Kislev specializing in excellent heavy cavalry. Seems like that would somewhat be a counter. Of course, cavalry is also very mobile, which is the opposite of what Nurgle is. So you might think, again, that a lot of that plays into the strengths of Kislev. Also have great ranged and even more slows, so I will admit things look grim for Nurgle initially, but they do have a number of strong tools in this matchup to help deal with some of those issues. One thing is just overwhelming healing, and this is sort of the highlight of Nurgle, right? The Herald in particular with that aura, Locus of Fecundity rather, plus the actual Fecundity army ability and Fleshy Abundance gives you the ability to take a huge amount of healing and be able to sustain through impressive amounts of damage. And you do have some armor piercing tools. The Soul Grinder is one. It's a decent single entity at fighting, and considering Kislev, I mean, they might bring Boris in this matchup. Kostaltine, I think, is more likely for the fire damage. My opponent here actually bringing Katarine to the table, which is interesting to try and control. You know, she's got plenty of slows and so forth, but anyway, nothing really to contest against the Soul Grinder. Heavily in melee, I mean, obviously the Bear Cavalry in a surround would do okay, but we've also got some spawn of Nurgle in order to give me a good monstrous infantry unbreakable healing target, and they also put out some pretty good damage too in the right situation. Cultists of Nurgle, in my opinion, are the best of the Cultist variants because they have regeneration as well as armor sundering, and of course can, like all cultists, summon their appropriate demon infantry unit, in this case a unit of plague bearers, which are pretty solid, and also again synergize with the armor sundering. Plague bearers, spawn of Nurgle, Forsaken, all of these have high weapon damage but not the best armor piercing values, so the armor sundering is quite nice. You can also use Lore of Death, but it's not nearly as efficient to cast Soul Blight. This, though, cultists are very cheap to bring. You can take them on horseback as well to give them some extra mobility. Here, they're just going to be on foot, supporting this blob of stuff, mostly fighting alongside the spawn, if need be. Nurglings, of course, to round out the rest of the starting army. 2 more spawn in reserve and a Pox Rider, just because I had the extra gold to upgrade a unit of Toads, which we do have one of those as well. 2 Beasts of Nurgle, which I, again, like against Kislev. It's another armor-piercing unit. They also have Mass to hold back the Dread Sleds, and a couple more Forsaken, another armor-piercing unit that's very cost-effective. Rot Flies can fly, of course, and given Kislev's lack of flying tools and ability to control flying units, they can be very good here, helping to reinforce against enemy cavalry. Got a couple of Poison Furies as well, just for extra mobility, and of course, max Nurglings. For my opponent, I want to say this is Rubber Duck of War or Turin. Again, I don't remember. Apologies about that. Tsarina with the Bear Cav and a Patriarch to support 1 sled and 1 spear. 2 Ice Guard in reserve with a single Tsar Guard. 2 more sleds, 2 Winged Lancers. We've got a Snow Leopard, a couple of Armored Kossars, Horse Archers, Dervishes, and regular Kossars. I am in particular a fan of the Armored Kossars here. They seem to be fairly cost effective. That extra armor does help them sustain pretty well against Nurgle infantry, and the pistol attack, of course, means they can stand at range. They're actually fast enough to kite some Nurgle infantry, which is kind of hilarious. But anyway, hopefully we won't be getting kited too much. And regardless, the Plague Mortar attack of the Soul Grinder does give me the ability to at least respond on a limited level to someone who wants to stand off and shoot. So we're on the crossing of the Sea of Claws here today. I'm going to be just pushing all in on the center objective, keeping everything together. Same thing for my opponent here, keeping his Bear Cav and characters and Dread Sleds all in one pocket here. The Dread Sleds actually pulling back ever so slightly, but Katarine coming in looking very, very good on her bear. I did see in a Q&A, unfortunately, it seems like because of the limitations of working under the COVID restrictions, without being able to collaborate in the office, one of the things that didn't get done that they would have liked to have done was the sled for Katarine, and I know that's something a lot of people were disappointed about. It does sound like that's something they want to hopefully add in at a later date, Personally, I think that would be great. I know some people are not a fan at all of the ice effects of the sleds. Personally, for me, thematically, I love it. I think it's very unique and cool, even if the implementation doesn't look maybe the best. Might look like Frozen Powerade, but that's okay. Certainly would be cool for Katarine to get a unique sled mount, though. The Dread sleds are going to sit back and just use their range attack to poke at the brown Seiken. I actually have taken the brown banner here. You can imagine what that's all about. But, actually do drop one of the spawn there. Got the sickly cultist as well. Definitely one of the grossest looking unit models we've ever seen of anything remotely human looking. The Soul Grinder also just chilling here for the time being, so I really am not too worried to just sit back and take this shootout because the Horse Archers and the Light War Sleds not really necessarily going to straight out DPS the Soul Grinder, but I did develop some Nurglings over here. We're going to get a Beast of Nurgle moving in as well to try and go after these relatively tattered forces. I've got this center position more or less on lockdown. My opponent kind of forsook taking that engagement smartly. Those bear calves are just going to get dragged down by all of this numbers and value and poison and everything. So here comes the Beast of Nurgle. Huge fan of these guys. They do not cause terror. So, you know, at 800 cost, in some ways they're worse than something like a Manticore, right? But that Slime Trail does mean they give an additional -5 melee attack, 10% speed, and an AoE, nice little support, and of course armor piercing, poison with some physical resistance. They're decent enough, and their own passive regeneration, of course, makes them a nice little single entity to add into a blob in order to just help everything perform that much a little bit better. Anyway, we've got some Nurgle Furies also moving in here, just getting absolutely filled with arrows from those Kossar spears, but objectives are just about online. Another 8 seconds. We'll be able to start capturing with the two Nurglings and the Beast of Nurgle. I should be able to out-capture my opponent here just by sheer weight, and the Beast of Nurgle's mass and sort of armor-piercing damage will prevent the War Sleds from just fully YOLOing in here and absolutely ransacking my poor little Nurglings. Now, that being said, way over on the far side, the Soul Grinder is going to get into combat with the spawns here. We also have one cultist, I think, very slowly trying to follow up. Not quite within range yet, but yeah, the Soul Grinder plus the Nurglings plus the spawn is obviously much more than a single Bear Cav plus Katarine can deal with. She is going to drop a Death Frost, no, Ice Sheet here to slow everything and try and get the Bear Cavalry away. I mean, it's pretty good. Even with the poison, they should still be able to get away there. Got some Winged Lancers also moving in to take out the Nurglings. Meanwhile, over on the far side, got into combat with these Nurglings and the Beast of Nurgle. Taking quite a bit of damage, but again, just pressuring the sleds and not allowing them to have their way. While Furies rush in here, the Furies and the Nurglings together are able to overwhelm the Horse Archers and then move on to the Kossar Spears. Of course, Furies do count as infantry size, so they will not be subject to the anti-large bonus of those Kossar Spears. It'll be a pretty beneficial situation for me. Big old beastie boy with the triple I, just having a grand old time here, surrounded by Barriots. It's fine. We're going to get some Nurgle Forsaken to send down there as well, and the Soul Grinder kind of pulled back from that engagement. Ice Guard are on objective number 3, raining in some shots, so I'm not wanting to overcommit here and lose too much value. Even though Nurgle is about taking damage and healing through it, you still want to try and focus on trading cost effectively if you can. If you end up getting too far behind on army damage value as Nurgle, even though you can kind of just brute force heal through it in many cases, if you're feeding your opponent extra supply by being ahead on points and you're not trading cost effectively, they're going to end up with a substantially bigger army than you, and you could potentially get tabled in the late game, which has happened to me a few times playing as Nurgle. But Cultists supporting Nurglings moving up over there, checking back in on this battle over here. The sleds pulled back. Beast of Nurgle is still fighting, though. Look at that, just still sustaining through, providing that Slime Trail and that extra armor-piercing damage. It's probably just about to go down here. But, man, look at the shots of those Kossars, too. Impressively just arcing up and over those Winged Lancers, but they have triggered their passive, so not much too much longer, and they will be routing, especially with the Forsaken coming to play. Forsaken of Nurgle, definitely not as good as Forsaken of Tzeentch, but still quite solid, only 800 points to pay for. Poison is a pretty worthwhile upgrade over just Warriors of Chaos Forsaken, right? Eventually, we do manage to get an engagement with those bear calves. I'm not too worried about taking the shots of the Ice Guard here. They're kind of at a very awkward angle. They're likely to do some friendly fire anyway because of that. Yeah, maybe not. They're fairly accurate. It looks like they didn't actually do much friendly fire there at all. But the Herald of Nurgle, of course, with heavy AP as well. The bear calves don't want to fight him in sustained combat, considering they're meant to be anti-large. But here, up on the high ground, the Nurgle cultist push forward with Nurglings, with the Soul Grinder, gets a summon, bottling up a huge amount of resources in my opponent's deployment zone. He's got the the Snow Leopard takes a big hit there from the one-eyed Soul Grinder as Armored Cossars try and pull back, get into a position to use their pistols. We've just about won the fight over here, and more than that, the entire time this fight has been taking place, more or less, I've had objective number 1 secured, or at least, for most of the time. Enough that we've taken a pretty substantial lead on points, about 500 and counting. Maybe not quite 500, but pretty close. Over here, though, this is bad. The Ice Guards actually draw a bead on my Herald and start doing a whole bunch of damage. We're going to use that Stream of Corruption, though, and the charge of the 2 spawn to interrupt their shooting, deal a bunch of damage. And now here comes the Cultist. Oh, yeah. I love the Cultist charge animation where he throws himself on the ground. Like, that's his attack, guys. I love it. It's so janky and ridiculous, just like doing some somersault onto these Ice Guard. It's bad. It's bad in the best way possible. But definitely those Ice Guards getting overwhelmed. I didn't use my summons early. Oftentimes you'll see people burn their demon summons from the cultists relatively early in the battlefield. I decided to wait with mine until I got good value out of them, or guaranteed, especially because, I mean, Plague Bearers are painfully slow, so you really need to summon them in the right position, because if you summon them out of position, it's going to take them 15 years to try and get to where they need to be. So just something to keep in mind. We've completely won this fight over here, almost finished off the Dread Sleds, and generated some great value in the meantime. But look at the value on these Warbear Riders. Already 12-10, and I basically don't have anything that can kill them in melee, besides bogging them down with overwhelming numbers. Not a lot I can do here, so more or less I'm just going to keep throwing bodies onto these 2 side objectives for the time being, and try and possibly just avoid the Warbear Riders, or maybe also just keep throwing bodies at them. I don't know. Nurglings can keep them tied down, perhaps, so let's see. Cultist, Herald, all doing mostly fine. We've got some more Dread Sleds, got some Cossars moving in, more Horse Archers. The Snow Leopard managed to extricate itself from this bad situation over here and is now coming down, and suddenly things are looking to turn against my hero squad here. A lot of value incoming for Kislev, and since the Warbear Riders are forsaking the center objective, I can now come in. We've got some Rotflies moving in to deal with the Armored Cossars. We've got some Furies as well. My successful objective number 1 force, led by the Beast of Nurgle, is now coming through the pass, ready to start to... Oh, wow. Real close-up on that Rotfly right there, like uncomfortably so. Oh, man, those things are gross. Again, in the best way possible. Very appropriate. Cool, very cool cinematic shot there. The Ice Guards just pouring in fire desperately, trying to kill as much as they can. We've got more Forsaken rallying, more Spawn also moving in as well. We check back in with my Lord squad, though. Things are not going particularly well. The Nurglings are still alive, just barely for the time being. They're just about to give up the fight, though. We've got more Dread Sleds moving in. The Herald is fully surrounded by angry bears. So is the Cultist. So really not great, but actually the Cultist fighting the Snow Leopard here is maybe not the worst for him. He should be able to trade okay there, and at least the fact that he has regeneration. The Herald of Nurgle also pops Fecundity here on himself to just continue to heal sustain through this. We should at least be able to tie up some resources for a significant amount of time, and I'm pretty far ahead on points at this point. If I can just keep my opponent's forces distracted and not allow him to come in and capture these objectives, that is going to be most beneficial for me. These Ice Guards eventually do end up in a big, disgusting blob fight. I mean, like, fully surrounded on all sides, pretty much by Forsaken. The Beast of Nurgle just all up in their center of their business. This is exactly the fight that Nurgle wants. Giant, disgusting blob fight. Very appropriate. More toads moving in as well with some rot flies. We're going to try and disrupt this cavalry. The soul grinder also moving over to perhaps move into melee just to keep that objective number 1 secured. Not that I necessarily even need to keep it secured, but just to continue to contest my opponent's forces wherever they are in order to play an active defense, right? Like I like to say, the best defense is a good offense, right? If I can say it actually correctly. So we're going to continue the attack and just keep up the pressure. Even if I do end up losing this objective here, again, just fighting these units kind of locally does force them to stay here rather than trying to concentrate to go seize another objective. We've got the toads coming over the ridge there, the rot flies having got the charge onto the winged lancers. You definitely don't want rot flies getting countercharged on the ground because they are actually kind of squishy. They don't have a lot of armor, only 33 melee defense as well, with that cloud of flies active, which is pretty decent, but still not amazing. Really, the armor piercing damage is what you bring them for. And in a fight like this, where they've got the toads and now a handful more tattered Forsaken, they should do just fine. The Soul Grinder also raining in some shots from behind. Let's look at these bears, though. Man, down on the low ground with Katarine. Yeah, almost 3,000 damage value. This other spawn just ended up coming down here to, again, just to tie up these units and not allow them to go into the center, else they risk losing this objective as well. Ended up working out pretty okay. Yes, we fed these bears a ton of value, but it ended up working out pretty well for me. I fed them almost 3,000 damage value, but we were able to sustain through. At this point, I've got strong enough forces here on the center to hold. We just about tied things up. And even if I couldn't hold the center, I mean, I've now pushed my opponent away from this objective number 1, so I could even secure this in a pinch, but forces in the center should be good enough to hold for the time being. Soul Grinder providing a nice little anvil here. If I could actually get the rot flies to charge in, there we go. Come on, you big nasty creatures. The rot flies moving in with their pincers, their proboscises, I don't know. I ain't no biologist. Anyway. Yeah, awesome stuff. I love the toads, too. Toads, honestly, are probably my favorite unit on Nurgle roster. Like, these guys just look so happy to be here, honestly. They're having a grand old time. Well played to my opponent. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching that one. Nurgle's interesting. It's, yeah, disgusting for sure. But if you can play to your strengths, get lots of units onto the objective, and just keep fighting cost effectively. Again, you do have to take damage, kind of the nature of it, even to charge up your army ability. But if you can, you still want to focus on trading cost effectively. And definitely the cultists, kind of everything working in tandem, even though the cultists didn't get a whole lot of value in and of themselves. And we didn't actually kill the bear cavalry. I mean, they managed to, again, feed them like 3,000 value almost. But, I mean, they were basically being just tied down the whole time, right? We were able to keep up enough resources to not allow them to actually win decisively at any individual point, right? Which is, again, kind of the strategy for Nurgle for the rest of my opponent's build here. The Dread Sled's definitely carrying some huge value as well, getting absolutely fed. Generally, the bear units do eat in this matchup. Ice Guard's also very cost-effective here. Again, kind of accruing some extra value because of that healing, but actually, all things considered, the Winged Lancers didn't do amazingly well. We were able to control them pretty decently, which is a big benefit here. I think my opponent probably should have brought these other sleds, this last sled in maybe a little bit sooner, but the one sled does also end up paying for itself. Horse Archers can be pretty decent here, but their sort of low ammunition is not amazing. They do have okay DPS, and they're decent in melee too, which can make a difference, but the low-ish ammunition means that often they can use all of their ammunition, and Nurgle can kind of just heal through it. So it is something to consider when taking Horse Archers in this matchup. For myself, Nurgle, Harold here, Harry Boy, doesn't do amazing, but he does enough. Same thing with the Soul Grinder. Actually, a lot of the value damage on my army ends up coming from, you guessed it, the Forsaken, all of which are fairly cost-effective. The Rotflies also, I mean, they don't end up actually doing that much damage, but tactically, they were pretty nice inclusion just to be able to screen. Same thing with the Beast of Nurgle, just providing that little bit of extra support, melee attack and speed debuff, and some decent damage as well. Nurgling's also very cost effective, actually trading way above their value in a couple cases. which is just great. If Nurglings can pay for themselves, that's always good. Also, almost 1,000 damage value on the one Fury that was fighting sort of Kossars and light cavalry and stuff. In tandem, Furies and Nurglings together do make a great combination to bring off a Vanguard, especially against a faction that lacks flying control like Kislev. So there you go. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching that one. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.